The worst case scenario was averted by the Phoenix Suns as Cam Johnson reportedly had surgery on Tuesday, but he will be back in as little as 2 months. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll talk about what that means for him, for this team, and what they need to do to get back in the win column even without Cam. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you all for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Wednesday. Suns did lose yesterday, but we have news to talk about, so do not miss the rest of the week's shows. Make sure to hit subscribe or follow wherever you're finding the show. We are free, and we are everywhere. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are at. Hit that follow or subscribe button, and we'll be in your feed every single day. If you are on YouTube, go ahead and hit that the bell down below to make sure you get a notification every time a new show goes live, and drop a comment down below with your thoughts on the latest on the Cam Johnson situation. Aaron Edwards is here joining us on his normal day. Now that the NBA is not playing any games on Election Day, we finally got a little bit of a break. We've been in a weird scheduling crunch. Aaron, I want to just ask you what you think of this whole Cam situation, because there's a lot of angles to hit it from. First, I want to tell everybody today's show, guys, is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to and faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. We'll hit them again later on in the show. But Aaron, I don't think we've talked since this whole thing went down. That was on Friday night. So how are you looking at this whole Cam Johnson situation? He's an injury-prone guy, another major injury, but with this announcement today that he was able to get this just sounds really painful, but when you just say somebody shaved down their meniscus, I don't love just like the image that comes to mind, but that is the best case scenario here. So what's on your mind? How are you thinking about this?
I feel bad for him. Like, really, this is the worst time for this to happen. And I'm sure he knew that. That's why even the little stuff he was playing through, when I think maybe a year or two ago, he wouldn't have played through some of the stuff that he was going with, even after I think he got hurt the second game, and like he got hurt the game after that. And yeah, I think that he would have probably sat before that, but he's in a contract year and this is a business. And you could just tell that I honestly thought that he was going to just get it repaired and just be out for a couple months. But I'm sure he just didn't want to get lowballed for an entire summer. And that probably was part of the thought process that he put into it, and to just come back as soon as possible to put some film out there. Like, I just think that's probably the only reason that he decided to do this. If it wasn't a contract year and that contract was signed, there's no possible way, if he signed this summer, that he would be coming back in a month or month and a half or 2 months. Like, I just think we wouldn't have seen him till after All-Star break probably. So I think the contract thing is probably the main thing to look at in this.
Absolutely. I do feel for him too. I've also learned this whole situation, I think, has taught me menisci, absurdly complicated. I mean, not like incredibly, but there's so many different versions of how this all can go. And so I already feel like I wasn't perfect on my description of everything on Monday's show. But from what I can gather, and we don't even have to spend too much time on this because it is kind of, it's never necessarily going to all be out there. He got this surgery, which shaves the part of the meniscus where the tear happened. It basically just sort of cuts that off. So the discomfort, the structural damage just goes away. That surgery is not always an option. But from what I've read, I don't think even the repair version is always an option. It's kind of like you get in there, you figure out what's up, and then you kind of proceed based on where the tear is, exactly how deep or long the tear actually is within that part of the knee, and then you figure it out how long you're going to miss based upon what they see when they cut you open is kind of how it feels. So I was kind of making it much more of like a which one. And I guess from the people online who know this stuff, it isn't always up to the player. In some cases it is, in some cases it isn't. And in the situation at UNC, when he tore the one in his left knee, he ended up getting the same surgery, just the scraping down, the cutting off of the tear, and he missed a couple months at that point. So I guess the upside sort of is he's gone through this before, and he at least had the head on his shoulders to know what's facing him. But I agree with you. It's hard not to think about this from the perspective of, this is his second contract. This is when guys get to make their money, and he had to have that factor in.
Yeah, like it was, and he's like needed. He finally got his starting spot, and he was gonna be on court in pretty big moments, and to miss months of that would have just been hard to like even bring up when contract talks came back. So I think like rushing was kind of like, I hate it, but it's like a football thing, but rushing was kind of his only option, and the fast one was really his only option in this situation, at least until we make a trade. If we had made a trade already and we had a scorer off the bench or something already, then I think that the pressure would have been on him a lot less, probably from James Jones and just within the like organization. But the fact that we are playing with one hand behind our backs and an open roster spot with a starter sitting at home, like everything was going against him to be able to sit longer than he probably wanted to probably. So I think that given just the setup of this team, he didn't have the option to wait.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I was going to ask you that. Do you think, well, it's hard to know what's in James Jones' head. I always end up going down that line of thinking, and I have to backpedal. Do you think it should make the Suns more urgent? Because on Monday, when I broke it all down, I was very much in the camp of they have to do something immediately. The number one ripple effect of this injury, even before we know what the response time, rehab time is for Cam, is it might weaken their leverage, but they need to make a trade. But now we know it's only going to be 6 to 8 weeks or so. Do you still think they should be all in on making a trade now, or do you think there's a chance that they could just make do and afford to be patient and just, Torrey Craig starts games and they try to cobble some stuff together in the meantime?
I think in terms of being ready for the playoffs, I think it doesn't matter. Like, I think we have to figure out our identity. Like, it seems like we just don't know like what to do in the crunch time right now, or what our go-to like runs are to get a bucket. We had a hard time scoring yesterday, even without Cam Johnson, or even with Cam Johnson, and the spacing is just bad right now. I think that Cam Johnson coming back will probably make that run smoother, but depending on an injury-prone dude to help the spacing on your team, even with Mikal Bridges shooting like 8 times a game with him being out, which is just not going to work, I think this team has a lot more problems than the roster spot at the moment. And maybe that roster spot and that trade will fix some of it, but I think our problems are way bigger than that right now. So
you don't think Ish Wainwright is the answer there? You don't. That's not the beacon of hope you're looking for.
No, I was. I'm down bad. I'm down so bad that I was thinking of like Carmelo Anthony today. So,
I mean, I don't think it would be that bad. So Chris Paul, it looks like his injury is not as bad as we thought it might be. TBD. I'm still waiting for the injury report. I'm looking at my email right now, and it's not there, but we'll see. I really doubt Chris Paul is just going to not be on that injury report at all. He's not one to just leave a game willingly and accept the loss. Like, they might have won that game if Chris Paul's in there, and they just lose by 12 to Philly. That makes me skeptical. But if he's out, if they still are able to have Ish, I mean, he was injured even before the passing of his father, so we're not even sure he's going to be healthy. He's also not like, the saving grace of a player. He might be able to plug some of these holes, but not, somebody who's going to be the biggest difference in winning and losing. They might go after somebody like Melo. I don't know how crazy it is, but I want to get into this stuff a little bit deeper because we can talk about, adding a new 10th man. But really the problem as I see it, and talked about this a little yesterday, it seems like you're getting to that point a little bit with what you're saying, is numbers 2 and 3 right now. Mikal Bridges and Deandre Ayton, they were quiet last night. They've been inconsistent this season on offense, and I think it really comes down to them. So I want to get into that a little deeper. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by LinkedIn and LinkedIn Jobs specifically. These days, every new potential hire can feel very, very high stakes. You want to be 100% certain you have access to the best qualified candidates available. Well, then you should choose LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's incredibly easy to put a job post on LinkedIn Jobs. I've done it before. You just put in the title, some of the specifications, work from home, work remotely, that type of stuff. Maybe you put the salary in depending on what type of job you're looking for and what your company's needs are, and that's it. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Then use simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's vital to finish the year out strong. I have right here underneath my little floating head on YouTube, my Twitter handle. I think that is a company you can look to as evidence that finishing the year out strong can really do a lot of good and help you look a little better to the jokesters out there. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, Aaron, so 15 points for Mikal Bridges, 12 shot attempts in 44 minutes for him, only 2 3-point attempts. Deandre Ayton, 14 points, only 11 shot attempts in 31 minutes. For him, both of those guys were a -13 and a -14 in the box score, the worst on the team. So I'm not, again, I tried to walk this line a little bit yesterday, but the chatter has sort of continued into today, so I don't think I'm being unfair. But I also don't want to overreact to one game. But I think the reality is these are not guys who you would look at over the course of the full season and say they've been those consistent night-to-night difference makers. And I guess part of me thought that, okay, they don't need to be like DeAndre Ayton individually, Mikal Bridges individually, even Cam Johnson individually before he went out. Doesn't need to be the same guy every night, but they can trade off. Well, with you don't have Cam Johnson now, so there's one fewer of those options. And you just can't have nights like last night where neither of them goes off, especially with Chris Paul not shooting a lot, injured in this case. We don't know if he'll miss more games. You're just getting to the point you're down, 2 or 3 of your best 6 players. The other 3 of those 6 players need to step up. Devin Booker did it. The other 2 did not.
Yeah. I figured once he got paid, like the whole is Ayton even on the floor thing would go away finally. But and Mikal Bridges too. Like I'm like, he still does things on the defensive end. So you can't really I would still like him to get more shots up, but you still know he's in the game. I don't know, Ayton sometimes he just disappears, and that's what it was yesterday. I know he's coming back from that ankle, but he was missing bunnies at the rim. He was just going up softer and not getting to the free throw line. He did so many fadeaways against Embiid, and I don't know, sometimes he kind of regresses back, but you can tell immediately when Ayton's locked in. If you get him involved early, you can see the way he runs and the way he seals off in the post. You can tell when he's engaged in the game. And I didn't get to watch much of it yesterday, but the parts I saw, he just didn't seem engaged the way you could tell when he's really ready to hoop.
You picked a good game to not engage with fully. I'm not going to lie to you. I think let's maybe just focus on Ayton. Maybe we can hit on Bridges in the next segment. I think there's plenty on both guys. And we've talked about them a ton, but I think this season's been somewhat unique. I don't understand a couple things with Ayton. One is, well, I think the other one I actually do understand, but it just is frustrating to watch. So we'll start with the one I don't understand. Early on in the season, he's getting balls on the short roll time and again. That seemed to be something they were comfortable with. They could execute it. He knew what to do. He knew he needed – I even feel like he knew he needed to be a little more aggressive. Like it wasn't just passing, which is sort of what he had done in the past when he got the ball in that spot. He was scoring. He was, taking a dribble and maybe dunking. He was whatever. Why did that go away? Like, is it just Chris Paul and maybe last night it wasn't able to be a part of things because he was out and on other nights other guys have just stepped up so Ayton hasn't had to do it? It just seems like we saw the first couple games of the season, the Booker-Ayton pick and roll, the Dallas game on opening night as a perfect example. Hit Ayton in the short roll when they double Booker or when they blitz Booker, and he can make a play, and he can be a difference maker. Last night was a perfect opportunity for that. I just don't understand why it's so hard to see outside of Devin Booker and Chris Paul in the pick and roll. It feels like what do we see 5 nights in a row, 10 nights in a row with this team? It's just frustrating after a while. It doesn't make a lot of sense why they go away from stuff when it works.
Yeah, it feels like we haven't seen it in a long time. I think Booker is probably getting blitzed less now. Like, I think that's just how Jason Kidd wants to play Booker every time now because in the playoffs it worked. And a couple of other teams try to do it, but I don't know. Like, he still gets a couple of games, especially in late moments of the game. And, yeah, they're just not doing the short roll, and we don't have the shooters that, like Cam Johnson, he kind of gave us a lot more space. And even then, like, it seemed like they were giving him way more space than they needed. So he was getting a lot of wide open shots, but everybody was. It just seems like the movement's kind of off right now because they know only 2 dudes on the floor will get shots up at this point. So I think just the space and like the movement in our offense is just way different than like the first 3 games of the season. Like, I wish we could go back into Chris Paul getting open corner threes and taking them and just like the way we were running that. But it just seems like they've completely went back to what we ran last year. And it like that, the word is out on that. Like, we can't really keep running that anymore because people know how to defend it.
It feels like they haven't had like a normal, really good game since they beat the Warriors by 29. Like, they beat the Pelicans. That's the game that Ayton went out of. The Rockets, Ayton doesn't play. That game's a little just sort of weird. They let the Rockets stay in it. The Wolves are a train wreck. They only beat them by 9. They lose to Jeremy Grant and the Blazers. They blow out the Blazers. That game, they should have. Yeah. And they lose to the Sixers. So, yeah, it's weird to say about a team that's 7-3, and that's why I don't want to like have people tuning in and being like, why are you guys tearing apart a team that's been winning? But, I don't think we should look at them as a team that is going to win 7 out of every 10 games for the rest of the season based on how they're playing right now. And I think Ayton's a big reason why. Like, the other thing I was going to say that I don't understand, or that I do understand more, but it's still frustrating to watch, is I kind of hinted at this a little yesterday, talked about it. This feels like exactly the type of game, like when you listen to Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal talk about big men and just even any player looking at the opportunity in front of them and not seizing it. Like a player who's a max guy, who has offensive talent, who has, sets and opportunities mostly built into the way that his team plays, looking at a game where Joel Embiid looked gassed from minute 1, did not play all that well. You have your starting point guard, your second best player go out. You don't have your starting forward, and you have an opportunity to dominate, and you put up 14 and 7. Like, I don't love to do that with Ayton all the time because I do think there are reasons that he doesn't always get the opportunities. But at a certain point, the blame does go to him. And it's just like they're going to need him. They could make an awesome trade for Jay Crowder tomorrow, and they're still going to need Deandre Ayton to be much better than 14-7 against Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I think honestly he looked more comfortable with campaign on the floor from what I saw. I think the speed of it all is just better for him. Like you can tell once he gets to ramp up the speed, he's kind of more comfortable making quicker decisions, doing the slow pick and roll and then waiting and knowing Chris Paul isn't going to shoot once he gets down there and seeing if he's going to get the ball or if it's going to be a kick out. I think that whole part of it is maybe not annoying, but I think it's like the tougher part for him. But when the game's speeding up, you can tell he makes decisions quickly. I think we're probably more critical than we should be at this point just because we know this is a playoff team already and, like, that's not going away. But the things we do well, we, like, do well. But the things that we're bad at, like, it's going to be really easy to use that against us during the playoff setting. So I think that's where the critique comes from. It's just that we know what a dude like Jason Kidd or if we play, like, I don't know, like Memphis or Kerr, like we know how they'll attack this team because it happened already. Like we have the same problems we had before, and we're still working through like the offensive stuff. But I just think that we're probably just critical because we can see what's going to happen during the summer.
He's fouling 5.4 times per 36 minutes.
He's fouling a lot.
And he's averaging 2 fewer rebounds per 36 minutes this year than last year. He's also only making 57% of his shots compared to he's been in the 60s both years that Chris Paul's been there. I think some of that is, early in the year taking some of those tougher shots. But he's also missing easy ones. He missed 2 layups last night. I think you're right, but I also think that's the standard that they've set for themselves. If they win – 2 more games in the finals in 2021, we're probably just still coasting off of that. But they lost that series. They lost the Mavericks. They want to win a championship, and he just got paid a max contract. Like, it is what it is, Like, Pascal Siakam, I think, is the example I always go back to where it was like he's a real feel-good story when he's like the 3rd best player on a championship team. Then the past couple of years, he's criticized a little bit. Now, he's taken those seasons and he's turned into a like fulcrum number 1 option on his own. And he's like putting up triple doubles as like a point center. Like,
yeah,
you do that if you're a great player. You just figure it out. You adjust. Maybe it doesn't happen overnight, but you do it. And it's only 8 games, but it's 8 games in a very important season. That's 10% of a season. I think it is worth criticizing a little bit. But let's pivot to Mikal Bridges. I think there's some interesting stuff there as well. I want to get into his shooting and, will he take on more of this ball handling if Cam Johnson's out, if Chris Paul misses games, etc. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number 1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis all year long. Get the latest odds and trends for every pro and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. I already told you the Cardinals are only 3-point underdogs on the road in Los Angeles. That feels like a tasty line. The Cardinals feel ready to implode any given day. So head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. By the way, Aaron, the Colts are making me – honestly, this is a take for you. This is a take for you, speaking of the NFL. I kind of would appreciate being a Colts fan this week because at the very least, you know that this team can win. You've seen it happen. And your owner cares. I'm not positive the Cardinals owner is – paying much attention to what's going on out there because he seems like he just wants his 5-year contract extension investments to look good. That's pretty much all he's worried about. So that's my hot take for you. I think it's a good week to be a Colts fan. It was a reminder that you are in good hands, at least in terms of somebody who's willing to do something, even if
it's insane.
Your words.
Yes,
I'm not going to criticize Jeff Saturday. He's a bigger man than me. I'm scared of him a little bit.
I mean, yeah. I'll never say Irsay doesn't love this team. He'll do literally anything for it whether it makes sense or not.
And I don't know if Michael Bidwell loves this team outside of it being the only thing his net worth is tied up in, to be honest with you. But this is not a Cardinals podcast. This is the Suns podcast. Let's talk about Mikal Bridges. He only took 2 threes last night. I want to get you the updated numbers on his per game 3-point attempts. He is at 2.2 3-point attempts per game. He's made 50% of them, but he's only taken 22 threes all year. Devin Booker has taken 58. Cam Johnson has taken 51. Damian Lee has taken 30. Landry Shamet has taken 30. Landry Shamet, who we always talk about never shooting when he's open, has taken 8 more three-pointers this year in less than half the amount of minutes that Mikal Bridges has taken. I don't know what to make of this. I'm past the point where it's just, okay, he has the ball a little more. He's doing some different types of things, so give him some time to adjust. You got to do both. It's not one or the other, handle the ball or take threes. Like, you do both things because that's what makes you an offensive player that other teams have to worry about. Yeah,
and even when it looks bad, I think he went ISO and he pulled up a long 2 and he really tried to get a bucket and I think he probably airballed or something after, or it was a bad miss. But even after that, I was yes, do that. Yeah. I just want you to attempt that. Just try it even. And yeah, I know he has a really hard deal on defense, and he usually guards the best player regardless of position a lot of the times. But you got to get shots up. You're also there for that. You're getting open shots. You were not even open last year, and you were jacking them up sometimes. How are you shooting less? And we wanted him to shoot last year more. How are you somehow shooting less this year? And we said a couple of podcasts ago, the shots have to go somewhere, and Cam Johnson was getting a lot of them at that point. But now you got to shoot. Chris Paul's not going to do it, and the shots got to go somewhere. Ayton's not really getting the shots as many shots as I thought he would get at this point of the season. So yeah. 88 points makes sense when nobody wants to shoot out there.
This is another one where it's it's not confusing to me because we've seen it, but maybe it was just that Cam Johnson was the guy we should have been putting stock in expanding his role on offense, because he's the only one who seems that they seem comfortable in integrating in that way, and who also is willing to take those shots. I mean, we talked about this last week. Damon Allred came on the show, and he brought up the Paul George comp. Well, I think that was actually just last week, because we were all happy about Mikal because he was getting the ball in the short court. But even those games, to be fair, he wasn't actually taking a lot of shots even. It was just cool to see that wrinkle, and he was getting a lot of assists, which was cool. He's still doing that, I guess, a little in terms of he's making good passes still. They're not always assists. That's fine. But what we had talked about with that was Paul George as the comp. And I brought up, Paul George is a guy where, yes, he's grown a ton since a role player with Danny Granger 10 years ago. Yeah. But he's always been a high turnover player. And I've actually never really hated that about him. In the conference finals against the Suns, he was at 6-7 assists a game, or turnovers a game, it felt like. He's every year 4 or 5, which is just really, really high for somebody as good as he is. I would love it if Mikal averaged 4 or 5 assists over I keep saying assists, 4 or 5 turnovers over the course of a season even, or even 10 games. He's at 1.1 turnovers per game. His usage is only at 14.6%, which I actually think would be maybe a career high. It's just not good enough. It's not going to do any damage. It's not a career high, but it's not going to do enough damage, it's not going to threaten a defense enough to, like you said, make any sort of real change to how the Suns are guarded when the playoffs come around. This is not stepping it up to the level where it's a new weapon the Suns can play around with.
Yeah, I just think he's way too good to just be driving or passing. That's really what he's doing right now. He's either driving to the basket, and he has been getting fouled a couple of times, but yeah, like there's no threat from him. And when you only have one scoring threat or maybe two, if Ayton's on the floor at any given moment, like that's just way too easy to defend. And this is the NBA. Like teams are gonna try to take away your best option anyway. And if nobody else wants to take the reins, then it's going to be pretty easy to kind of either force Book to become a chucker or somebody on the team has to get those shots up too.
Is this your way of bringing back Melo? Are we going full circle? Is that who you're hinting at right now? Carmelo Anthony?
No, I really just want Mikal Bridges to be like more assertive. Like I think a more assertive Mikal Bridges is better than what Melo could give us right now. I think if he gets
I even think of like Drew Holiday comes to mind because I was poking around a little bit at like have other guys, because we've been talking so much about Chris Paul being like, you know, is he going to compromise? Is he going to this? Is he going to that? And I was poking around. Is it maybe Monty Williams? Is he a coach who has this track record of a guy stepping up from what their role was into something bigger? I couldn't really find too much of a track record because he had the weird dip where he coached Chris for a year, then they were really bad, then he got fired right as soon as they got good again. So it's hard to measure that. But obviously Drew Holiday was on some of those teams. And I thought about it from the perspective of, I think sometimes we also have this thing with Mikal where we sort of let him off the hook because we have it in the back of our heads. He does so much on defense, right? Where it's like he has to guard the best player on the opposing team's offense every night, kind of no matter who it is, unless it's a center, although he was guarding Embiid a lot last night too. And so, okay, you can accept he does a little bit less on offense. But again, like, I just think we're getting to the point, like, this is year 5 for him. And he's in his prime physically, basically. You know, he's in his NBA prime, mid to late 20s. Like, Drew Holiday has a 26.3% usage rate. I know this year is a little weird because Chris hasn't been healthy. But even the past few years, 22, 23, 24, he's at a 30-ish, 30, 40 assist percentage. And he's been at that for years. And he's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. We all saw what he could do defensively in the finals, right? Like, you think of Sean Marion in his prime. Like, I just think that's the standard Mikal kind of has for himself, and he's not meeting it right now. Like, he can't be a one-way player, and there's just a lot of nights where that's pretty much what he is. You said it. Like, he's driving and kicking, or he's moving the ball, or he's setting screens or cutting. Like, he's not Josh Okogie, you know, with the jumper. Like, Josh Okogie with the jumper would be a pretty good player, but that's still not somebody who would make $20+ million a year. He's more than that. He doesn't play like it very often.
Yeah, and I think what makes everybody like more frustrated is when you get a Mikal game and you see just everything in his arsenal, and he'll bring it out every once in a while, and you're just like, yes, just do that every time. You know you can do it. It's not like Chris Paul and Book are going to be mad at you for going off. Like, get some shots up. Like, I'm sure they want you to do this too. And sometimes he just sits in the corner or just thinks he's a rim runner or whatever and like a cutter. And he just does that for a whole game when he's just way too good for that.
Yeah, 13 shots, 27 points against the Pelicans. That was by far his best game of the season. But even then, just 13 shot attempts, just 5 3-point attempts, you know, 4 assists, which was nice. You know, that's a really good game. But you're still talking about him having to make almost every single one of his shots because he's just not forcing them. You know, I think he's a guy where what's his career high per game? He's averaged this year is his career high in points so far at 14.9. That's because that Pelicans game he had 27.
Yeah.
And it's been only 10 games. He's been at 13, 14 for the past couple of seasons. Like, he should be at 16 to 18 points, I think, in the best version of this team, especially without Cam Johnson. I wanted to ask you, though, one final question because I brought this up yesterday, too. How would you feel about the idea of starting Damian Lee at the 3 and Mikal at the 4 just while Cam is out or just until there's a trade, and we'll see what the rotation, the roster looks like at that point? Because it seems like that's the lineup Monty trusts right now anyways. Damian Lee's closed like 3 or 4 games already this year, and there's a lot of nights where Mikal can survive at the 4. I just feel like why not just go to your best lineup right away with more spacing rather than messing around with Torrey Craig and seeing if he's up for it that night, which he's very hit or miss like that.
Yeah, I think our rebounding would just extremely take a hit, and I think that's where Monty's brain goes. Torrey Craig is a really good rebounder. And
he had 1 rebound, and the Suns got out-rebounded by 11 last night.
Yeah, I think they were just awful. You can't tell,
this Philly game has me heated. I'm mad about what happened last night.
Yeah, I think they were just awful yesterday, but I think that we would just be way too small. And I think Monty hates going small. Like, he's still kind of old school in that way where he really doesn't like – I mean, we got killed on the boards in the playoffs a lot, but you can just tell, like, he doesn't want to lose because he went small. And we're a team that punishes teams that go small. So I think that would just be hard. And plus, Damian Lee, he's like one of the only reasons that one of the only things that keeps our bench from looking abysmal from time to time. Like, he kind of needs to play in that group because Book would just he has to play with the second unit anyway, like at the end of first. And I think his minutes would end up getting really up there if he ends up having to like be on the floor with Torrey Craig, Campaign, him, Jock, and pretty much throw anybody else in there. And I just think that the minutes would really just start getting too high for Book if we put Damian Lee out there and Shaman in the second unit.
Yeah, you're probably right. I just think Torrey Craig he's just too hot and cold for what they're needing right now. Like, if nothing else, just need somebody where they know they can roll the ball out and kind of know what they're getting. Like, that's the thing with Jay Crowder even. Like, obviously, he's even a better defender than Craig is, better shooter than Craig is. But overall, like, you would get some nights where Jay Crowder took some wild shots. He was like 2 of 10, and he's like a plus 15, and the Suns blow out their opponent because he executed what he was being asked to do, and he was at least consistent in terms of, I'm going to take the threes that are there. I can handle my defensive matchup. You know, I'll rebound a little bit. And Craig, it's like last night is not an outlier. I know I'm overreacting a little bit to one game, but, you know, a game where he misses a bunch of his shots and doesn't add a lot else is pretty common for him. That's not like crazy. And so I just think you need more consistency. But luckily they have Minnesota again, who is not a scary opponent by any means. Maybe that's a night for them to bounce back. Also not a night for them to go small. So I don't think we'll see it here on Wednesday. But anyway, I just think it's worth considering. Like, even put Šarić in there potentially and have him be like a 10 to 15 minute per game starter. And yeah, you'll get exposed defensively, but he can space the floor, he can pass, and you at least know what you're getting from him. But I'm panicked. I don't know why. It's 7-3 and they're good. I don't know why I'm freaking out, but we haven't had a season where they are going through regular NBA team stuff. It's just been like 2 perfect regular seasons. So I feel like I don't even know what to do here.
Yeah, I think it's just we finally get to complain about how it looks, even if it like comes in, even if it makes wins. But we still know what bad and good and pretty basketball looks like. And like, I mean, the Warriors are playing awful basketball right now too. So I still think that people are just figuring out their teams right now and what they're going to do next. And the Utah Jazz are #1 in the West right now. So I think everything will probably regress back to the mean, and we'll probably figure out what this team is in a couple games.
Great note to end it on. That'll do it for today's show, guys. Tonight's game against Minnesota. I'll have a recap right after the buzzer, and we'll have one more show to round out the week. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen. If you like what you're hearing, hit subscribe or follow wherever you found this show today. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of them. We are there. We're there for you every single day. In the meantime, go make Locked On Sports Today your second listen to get caught up on everything else going on around the entire world of sports in less than 20 minutes. And I will talk to you guys all tomorrow.